And he said to me, I am your family. This is exactly how he talked. I am your family and I'm ashamed of you. I'm a distant relative of yours and I'm ashamed of you. You're fooling the black people. You know as well as I do that black people didn't do anything. He's about 60, 65, etc. Deep, deep sickness. Which is very different from what I found when I was in Port of Spain. I was speaking to a vast audience that stretched out into the street. And when I was finished speaking, a black man came up to me, an old man, and started to pound his head on the table. I was very frightened because I thought his head would open up. And he said to me, he started to cry and he said, I am so grateful. I am so grateful. This is the first day that I'm proud to be a black man. This is in his 60s. So we begin to realize that this reconstruction is absolutely vital to us. African history cannot be reconstructed like European history. Europe does not need this kind of intense, precise sort of research. That is why in Cairo, when the Europeans arrived, even the people who brought the Cairo conference together, they said only 2 people arrived prepared. The Africans, Sheikh Anta Diop and Theophilo Benga. The Europeans brought nothing. They expected to walk through like before. They expected everybody to repeat their cliches and accept it. Sheikh Anta Diop brought a truck full of books. And they couldn't get through anymore because we have put a stop to that. A line is being drawn. A whole body of scholars are emerging now, a whole school, because this is the new crusade. We don't need firearms because they're going to take the guns and turn it on themselves. What we need is the firepower of intellect. What we need is the ammunition of our history, the facts. We need the facts. We need to go back in our history and find once again the ground out of which we have come. We need to find these things so that we could set this whole place on fire. We could undermine the foundations of this civilization because this civilization is founded on a lie. The strength of blackness, the strength of the black man and woman lies in the morality of the truth. It is not necessary for us to exaggerate. It is not necessary for us to invent. It is not necessary for us to create new myths because the truth itself is more astonishing than any myth that we can create. The more we learn of that history, the more we become aware of the extraordinary richness that lies behind us. We belong to something that is quite extraordinary. We are no longer simply to be linked with slaves. We are no longer simply to be linked with the peripheral African. True, Kunte Kinte is one of my ancestors, so is Chicken George. But I am more than Chicken George. So roots is just a faint, it's just a faint strand in the wind, a faint thread. There are far more serious roots than that. Our roots do not lie in slavery. It lies in chapters and phases of history that go back to the very beginning of man. Because when we go into Europe, there is not a single Cro-Magnon, not a single Caucasoid until about 50,000 years ago. That is why when I was in Wales, many years ago, I was with African poets, Wole Soyinka, etc. And we were at this conference of Commonwealth Poets Festival. And every time these people get up, they talk about the younger members of the Commonwealth. And I got up and said, what do you mean by younger? In what sense are we younger than you? We are the elders of the world. How come we are the younger? If they were not so young, they would not have been so bloody insecure as to try to force down that civilization down our throats. If they were not so young, they would have had the generosity and the humanity to allow us to exist as people in our own right. Whatever the nature of their culture, whatever their conquest, whatever the the nature of their domination, they could have allowed us to be human. But they wanted to cut everything out. They wanted to deny us our humanity, our history, our right to a separate consciousness, our right to a heritage, our right to a past, so that even today, everything we learn makes us realize that we're constantly having to move away veils in order to arrive at the truth of the past. It is covered with so many lies, it isn't funny. And as soon as you unveil one lie and you show them the truth, they find another excuse. Everything that we unveil, there is some explanation. Like when I found the stone head, well, I didn't find them, but when I made it obvious that those stone heads were African, we find an expert saying the reason why they have broad noses and thick lips is because the tools were blunt. Every frivolous excuse is used by the establishment in order to establish, in order to maintain, in order to consolidate the basic untruths that lie at the foundation of this civilization. We cannot stay silent. There's a different kind of revolution. A revolution that is more serious than rebellion. Rebellion is an act in which someone rebels against a leader or rebels against a system in such a way that even though they may triumph, they remain within the system because their consciousness is ruled by that system. Revolution is more serious. Revolution is not just the victory, the rebellion, and the possible victory over the enemy. Revolution involves thinking very differently from the enemy, so that when the defeat occurs, the defeat can even occur within the enemy. When the Jews, give them their due, when the Christians sing through the Jews and others, when that Christian spirit began to undermine the Romans, all the value systems of the Romans were overturned. It wasn't just a question of a rebellion. Christ brought a revolution in consciousness. He made the little man important. When the Romans said to be great is to be rich, to be wealthy, to be powerful, Christ said, look at me, I'm not rich, I'm barefooted. I am not wealthy, I just have my shirt on my back. I am not powerful. I call myself king of the Jews, but my kingdom is somewhere else. This is where my kingdom is. This is my universe. Okay? That is what overturned. The situation in Europe is that Europe profited not only from the Greek invasion of Egypt, it profited most from the Moorish invasion. Because the African was unlike the European. He did not seek to destroy what he found. He gave without destroying what he found. The European did not give us that mercy. He tried to destroy the root of everything he found. It was not enough to introduce his kind of thing. He wanted to wipe out everything we had in our head. That is the reason why, even though slavery is over, we are still his slaves. He has tried to colonize this universe. He has tried to establish dominion over our thoughts, over our consciousness so completely that we do not even accept our own history when it's presented to us again. It seems like such a bizarre, strange, astonishing thing.